Good afternoon, this is Fred James. We're speaking to you and coming to you at the moment live from a studio in Bellingham, Washington. This is Man versus the State with Fred James. Today, we're having a different kind of a show. My guest is a libertarian. His name is Bruce Guthrie, and he used to live in Bellingham and now lives in Edmonds, and he's an interesting character. But what's interesting and intimate in this particular show is that I went to this big high school in Illinois called New Trier. Oddly enough, so did Bruce. So we grew up in the same hometown in Illinois, and I bumped into him in about 2003 here in Bellingham, where he was a teacher at Western. Bruce, welcome to your old stomping grounds.
Fred, it's so great to be here, and it's great to see you.
Well, thank you. Do you have fond memories of Winnetka, Illinois?
Oh my gosh, well, the lake, and it's where we went to high school, and all the things that happen in high school that are so essential to how you become a person.
Yes, the lake especially. I was a lifeguard there for 2 seasons.
And I used to canoe and sail sunfish on Lake Michigan.
And so when I was in the it was a couple decades ago, I could drink the water I swam in then. And you remember the alewives dying by the thousands in early June?
But that was the real reason that I didn't want to drink it. It wasn't because of some kind of pollution. It was the alewives were terrible, and terrible stink on the beaches, too.
That's right. They would come along with these giant things and dump them into the sifters, and the sifters would take the sand out, and then they dump all the... Yeah, it was disgusting in early June, but I have fond memories also of sneaking into Ravinia in the summer and watching the Chicago Symphony.
New Trier was marvelous for a government school.
Yes, because it had a lot of money. A lot of money. You can buy a $40,000 back screen that holds images if you have a lot of money. And so there's an advantage to that. So how did you end up in Bellingham, Washington?
Well, let's see. I was leaving a job in St. Louis. I was director of marketing for an ergonomic office chair manufacturer, and we were looking around for where we wanted to live. And we knew we wanted to live near family. And so it was either move back to the Chicago area, where my family was, and New Trier, or to move out to Bellingham, Washington. And my in-laws had done an extensive meteorological study of the 48 states. And there were 2 places that had low summer highs and high winter lows, the tight band, because each of the in-laws had different issues with either hot or cold temperatures, and they wanted to leave a place where they could live together. And it was either North Carolina or Bellingham. And they went to North Carolina and couldn't understand a word anyone was saying. And so they came out to Bellingham, and they loved it out there. And so Grace and I, my first wife, went to check out Bellingham, and we loved it too.
And now let me add one of the funniest things I ever heard about a man in my life, and that's Bruce. Bruce is my ideological ally and colleague. But also, we went walking around this little lake near my house in Sudden Valley one day with Bruce's first wife before she died. She was a lovely lady named Grace, also a New Trier graduate. And when we were done with this walk around the lake, I said to her, well, you put up with this big Lugan, how's that? Is it rough? And she said, oh no, Bruce has no faults at all, at all. And I thought, my God, what's he doing? What's he done to this girl's mind?
She was the champion of diplomacy. I think that's what really was going on there.
She reminded me of a character out of a novel, a nymph, a little kind of a fairy with wings. And we were at the beach one time, and I had my ghetto blaster. Of course, I was going to play Brahms, but she said, oh no, she said, you might offend some people if it's loud. She was very sensitive.
Either that or Jane Eyre.
Yeah. Okay, let's get into you went, after New Trier, you went to Cornell, and you studied philosophy. You got a degree in that.
I started studying mechanical engineering.
Yeah.
But like 2/3 of the people starting out that mechanical engineering program, it was termed a weed-out program. I didn't finish. And while I had been struggling in these mechanical engineering courses, I had been slowly getting up to the requirements for a philosophy degree. And I realized that's what I love to think about.
But did you encounter any of the salient libertarians at the time yet, or was it just straight philosophy?
Not a, well, of course, there was Ayn Rand. And in my freshman year, a dorm mate of mine said, "You really need to read this." And boy, was he right, because I read Fountainhead and absolutely loved it, and read Atlas and absolutely loved it, and Anthem and Night of January 16th, and then got into the nonfiction stuff and loved every bit of it. It was a complete revelation to me. This idea that I didn't have to feel guilty about doing what was in my long-term self-interest.
Yes, yes.
That hook that had been set into people in order to manipulate them, the hook of guilt. And I didn't have to feel that.
Did you ever experience that beforehand? Did you ever feel guilty for wanting to get ahead or make profit or get the girl or whatever you had in your mind? Did you ever have that guilt? I never did in my life.
I felt the pressure, but I didn't. I felt like I was expected to feel guilty.
Yeah.
And wondered about it, and I didn't really feel confident rejecting that guilt until I read Ayn Rand.
Well, I met a lot of people that it depends on when you read her, at what age, and what's your context. I read her right after the Army. And everything she said, yes, 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 yeah, I agreed with. How could this writer be so brilliant? Why, she agrees with me. That's the way I looked at it. And she clarified all the hazy thinking I'd had before that. Well, that's Rand. But that might be a good time to introduce, as we get a little bit more serious. But before that, when did you and how did you become a libertarian?
Oh, golly. Well, I was aware of the David Berglund campaign. I think that might have been 1984. He was the first libertarian I was aware of, the first time I applied that word to my thinking.
And did you distinguish it between liberals and conservatives?
At that point, yeah. But, I was a young, healthy, and horny, if I may say that on air, young man. And I had empathy for all the people who were sexually marginalized. And so that was one of the things that persuaded me to be socially liberal. I wanted gays and lesbians to have a right to pursue their particular desires. I realized they weren't hurting anybody else. And so that meant to me I couldn't be a conservative. And I knew already I was an atheist.
This is fantastic. I came at it a little differently than you,
But then, on the other side, I knew that the free market produced amazing things. I knew that free market is really the best milieu in which creative, talented people can create amazing new things. And I really valued that. So here I was, free minds and free markets. And it took me until 84 or so that I realized the term for that is libertarian.
And just think, Bruce is old school. He typed all his papers on a typewriter, maybe it's electric, but this is pre-computer days, right?
Well, I took a computer programming course in 1978.
But when did you first
where we programmed on computer cards.
Yeah, cards, yeah.
Fortran.
When did you first have a...
I used a typewriter for just part of freshman year of college, and then I started using the Macs because Cornell had a nice little computer lab, and Apple was promoting the Apple to universities. And so I typed all mine out on the Mac from about halfway through freshman year on.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So that would be in 82.
Well, that's better than me.
82.
I wrote everything out with a typewriter. And then when you make an error, you have to white it out or...
I did that in high school.
Oh, you know all about it then.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Well, so you're rapidly you're expanding what you're reading, and you're going to bump into these characters.
Marvelous characters.
Could you read who those people are?
Ludwig von Mises, Milton Friedman, Murray Rothbard, Friedrich Hayek, and Ayn Rand.
All right, now, these people are what I would call pretty much the core basic reading of libertarians. There's a few others, Robert A. Heinlein. If you add him, you need some smiles between all this seriousness.
One should go back to Locke.
Well, yeah, but that's for political scientists. How many people do you know have read his famous treatise? on human understanding.
When I was taking I have a government course requirement as a liberal arts major back in the early 80s.
Yeah.
Locke was assigned, and as was John Stuart Mill and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. I think that these five people you mentioned are continuing in that liberal, in terms of classical liberal tradition of wanting freedom for the individual, valuing the individual as opposed to the collective.
That is right. And if you remember, I spoke to Walter Block about how in the tradition of Western society, the concern for the individual's rights, individual ethics, looking at the entire scope through the eyes of an individual and each individual, that's so modern. It doesn't start until about Locke's time. And these people all embrace that.
Yeah, yeah. There might be some argument that it can go back to Aristotle a little bit too.
Very little, but...
but certainly not Plato. Plato's Republic is a ghastly document.
And yet it's so well written.
It is well written, and everybody gets in a philosophy class and government class gets exposed to Plato's Republic.
Yes.
An interesting thing I heard recently, though, was someone thought, you know how the Republic, he builds it up. There's the philosopher kings. Everything is in a rigid structure. Those who have the ability to lead should be the leaders.
The gold
and because
people.
they have wisdom, they don't want to lead, right? All the people we have wanting to lead these days, like Trump and Hillary Clinton and Jeb Bush, they're corrupted already, corrupted by the power. The power has drawn the absolute worst in society to that position. So the philosopher kings were supposed to not want to rule, but rule out of a sense of obligation. So he built up this huge structure, and at the very end, I mean, it almost seems like the last few pages of the Republic, he lays out his system for eugenics, where the philosopher kings are deciding who gets to reproduce for the good of the state. And any babies born outside of that system are exposed.
Yes.
Left for the wolves to eat.
Yeah.
And so this friend of mine, I wish I could remember his name, says Plato knew that was an absurdity. That the whole thing of his Republic was a reducto ad absurdum.
Yes. And yet so well written.
And that Plato knew that.
Yes.
And that everyone is, all the statists who have taken Plato, whether it's Marx or whoever, to say that we need to build up, probably not Marx, more like Lenin, that we need to build up this state, they misinterpreted Plato. They missed the absurdum at the end.
Yes. And you remember a character in the Republic called Thrasymachus?
Thrasymachus is how I used to pronounce it, but probably the same.
6 of one, half dozen of the other. You know who the character was? He was a classic bully.
Okay.
And Socrates rips him apart. Oh, you mean you're right because you're loud and strong and you got a sword in your hand? That makes you right? But when I thought, this is great. You know, I read it and loved it too, just like you did. But I also saw errors in socialism and crap and eugenics. And Hitler's going to love this. And he did elements of it. But Thrasymachus was just trounced by the wit and intellect of Socrates. And I thought, well, why doesn't he do the same to all the other characters too?
Well, the one who really destroyed the Republic, in my mind, was Hayek. Because Hayek said, look, in order to run this ideal system, you're going to require a lot of information, a lot of knowledge.
Yes.
And that knowledge is practically and perhaps in principle unavailable to the people who have to make the decisions. They will never be able to set pricing from an office.
And that's von Mises.
And is that von Mises too?
Well, that's von Mises on why socialism never can work.
Oh, okay.
And why markets do work
and I was
so much
that
better.
To Hayek, and perhaps I was wrong.
Well, Hayek said it too, but I think von Mises said it better in his book Bureaucracy. You ever read that one?
I haven't read it. I've only read clips of von Mises and loved everything that I've read.
All right, let's have some fun. You and I both admire these people.
We do.
What would you say? Who's your favorite of this gang of 5?
Oh my gosh. Oh, this is really, really hard.
Well,
there are 2 that stand out in my mind, and that's Ayn Rand and Milton Friedman.
Okay.
And the reason is because of how successful they were at promoting capitalism to the masses.
Yeah, they were.
When Free to Choose became a movie series, a TV series in the 80s, that had as as big an effect on making Reagan successful, to the extent that he was successful, and it was a mixed bag, at reminding people that free markets work. And of course, Ayn Rand is the one who said, look, capitalism is moral, and proved it philosophically pretty rigorously.
Yes, yes. And that's why she's so despised by liberals and communists and all sorts of leftists of the world.
And there are so many Ayn Rand fans around. The whole objectivist movement it's a minority.
Why? What is this?
My goodness.
You might come in close.
It's the movie Atlas Shrugged pin.
And who gave it to me?
Well, I gave it to you.
You did, yes. See, Bruce is a really good old friend, and I've worn this ever since because I truly admired it. When I first saw the first Rand show, all my academic and movie-type critics panned it. It's going to be crap. Well, all right, so it was made without a lot of money and in a hurry. It was not a well-made movie, but how do you destroy a gem like that? When I saw that train running along over the new Reardon Meadow, over that long track in Colorado, remember that scene?
Did a tingle go up your leg?
Oh, not leg. I was full tears on that.
Indeed.
Because
that moved me too.
For 30 years after I read that novel 8 times, I wanted to see that in motion pictures.
Yeah.
I'd like to see it really well done.
Yeah.
I'd like to see maybe a 16-part miniseries.
That'd be wonderful.
Really well financed and done.
Yeah.
Think we'll ever see it in our lives, Bruce?
I don't know.
This is over. He's too honest. You'll never make a politician.
Sorry.
But let's move on to your politics.
All right.
You decided when you were teaching at Western. That you would run for office. Why and what did you tell us about that?
Well, I was teaching business courses at Western Washington University as an adjunct faculty, and that's not a full-time job. And I wanted to promote the cause of liberty. And a friend of mine, a libertarian friend, whose name escapes me and shouldn't, he's cousin Brett Wilhelm, was looking for candidates. And he interviewed me and apparently liked what he saw and says, well, we need someone to run for Congress in the 2nd Congressional District in 2002 against Rick Larson. And I said, yeah.
That's when I moved here. And what was that like?
Running for office?
Yeah.
Golly, well, you know, I saw it as an opportunity to teach other people.
The teacher teaching.
Yeah, it was teaching. It was an opportunity to spread the ideas of liberty. It was an opportunity to try to bring to the libertarian movement a face that looked conventional, that wasn't scary. You know, some people, we know we rub shoulders with them at the conventions. We're idiosyncratic. We're a little bit odd in a peaceful way, of course. And I endorse any peaceful way to be odd is something I really embrace. I want a society where people can be really, really odd as long as they're peaceful.
And do disgusting things that you'd never come near. Like, in this state, marijuana is now legal.
Oh my gosh.
But have you gone out and bought and smoked it? Oh, it's legal, I can do it now. Have you done it?
I have not.
Either have I. Why not? Why haven't we done it? We don't want to.
It's been since 1985 that I've enjoyed marijuana in college.
Yeah.
And I just, you know, I enjoy clarity of thought.
Me too.
Since reading Rand, I put a lot of value on my mind.
Me too.
And seeing the world for the way it is.
Yeah.
I'm really glad I had those experiences in college. Mushrooms. I will never see the world the same after.
Did you do a mushroom trip?
I did. Yes.
And did it?
Well, it breaks down your mind's ability to weed out extraneous information.
And so it just goes wild and crazy?
Well, it makes you hyper aware. And though I'm not hyper aware anymore, I think it's given me an ability to concentrate on small things.
How about alcohol? Alcohol's always been legal all our lives.
You know, I went through 2 or 3 year periods when I didn't have, like I was a teetotaler. And now I have about a couple of beers a week.
With food probably at dinner.
Yeah, with food at dinner.
It's amazing how much this fellow and I are alike. And by the way, we both went to the same high school, but a few years apart. What the heck? I was graduating the day he was born almost, right? You were born in 1963, presumably.
That's correct, yeah.
I graduated in 63. And yet, the experiences we had there developed us into this Randian man, or whatever we are today. And
we're kindred spirits across
Yeah.
across generations, and it's really neat to have connections like that.
yeah, you can know that old people still think positive thoughts. And you know how many, my class was the small class. We only had 992. And you know how many libertarians it produced?
How many?
Darn few. Me. Although I have a lot of friends that are kind of, because politics is unusual. It doesn't get you anything.
You know,
So you're either a thug and wanting to get at the top of it so you can rule other people, or you just want no part of it. And a lot of my peers don't know part of
You
it.
know what? It depends on how you define the term libertarian.
Yes.
Because at the congressional level these days, our congressional candidates get about 2% of the vote. At the presidential level, we're really happy if we top the 1% number. But if you do what Cato has done and David Bose and survey people, are you generally fiscally conservative? Do you generally like the idea of balanced budgets and free markets? Do you generally think a huge percentage of people say, yeah, we like free markets better than command economies, it's better than more government control. And if you ask them, are you generally socially tolerant? You know, how do you feel about gay marriage or whatever the social issue? They're generally socially tolerant. If you combine those two categories, it comes out to like 30% of the electorate.
Those are the ones that
generally libertarian.
They'll admit it, yeah.
Yeah, and so they're not extreme enough for you and I. You and I are fundamentalist libertarians, moral libertarians, not just practical libertarians.
Well, I think we've gone the whole way. We dove into it completely, and we see the moral, the practical, the historical, the intellectual, and we dove in even further than that and created these five heavyweights,
Heroes and heroines,
heroes of liberty.
Yeah.
Each one has its. If I were to answer my own question, I can't either. I like them all.
They're great.
Although I think I like him least. Hayek.
I loved Road to Serfdom.
Yeah.
Not in
That
the
was
original. The Reader's Digest version of it is marvelous, succinct, well argued. That's to be recommended very highly.
Well, but then each one has a book like that. Friedman, Capitalism and Freedom, 1962, University of Chicago Press. A marvelous book from one end to the other. And yet he advocates the Fed. I mean, we're all human. We have one little error, like, why would he do that?
That's right.
Freedom, government can't work. Freedom, on this issue, freedom is much better than government. On this, all through the book, he does that. Freedom is better on this issue. And then he comes to the Fed. Oh no, we need the Fed. No, we don't.
We should never put someone up on a pedestal. We should always realize that people are, and so we take the good from them.
That's
and
right.
we forgive them for the bad.
That is
And
correct.
We got Thomas Jefferson.
Yes.
What another great hero of liberty.
And yet a slaveholder.
And the guy who held slaves, of course.
Yeah.
And Martin Luther King. Let's put him up. He was fighting against bad laws, Jim Crow laws, the denial of basic individual rights on the basis of color. And what he did, I think, was libertarian. And yeah, he advocated some socialist policies and slept around on his wife and plagiarized his master's thesis.
He was a human being.
A great, great man.
An orator.
Yeah. So and we're going to find flaws, like you disagree with Rand on her minarchy.
That's right. I think she's just baseless on it. Or she also had a few other errors, but I'm not here to put down my heroes, although that's very easy to do, because they're humans. They make errors. Like she liked cats, good, and she liked the light music of the European composers, that's good, but she didn't like Mozart, that's bad. I mean, how do you not like Mozart? I mean, this is subjective.
So we have differences.
Yes.
But we have to come together. You know, it's unite or die. United we stand, divided we fall. And so anarcho-capitalist libertarians have to combine with minarchist libertarians such as myself in order to advance the cause of liberty. And I hate it in fora, whether it's Facebook or YouTube or whatever the forum is, where the anarcho-capitalists are busting on the minarchists, or
which
the
you
minarchists
saw
are
on
being
my
critical.
Facebook page.
Sure,
It was
it's terrible. I want to take these guys by the collar and say, look, go out and find a liberal or a conservative and convert them, dagnabbit.
not waste your time on each other.
Oh,
I understand what you're saying. And earlier, you being the philosopher, you probably can resonate to this line. Socrates and Plato. Socrates was asked about Aristotle. I forgot who was asked about who, but he says, I love Aristotle, but I love the truth more.
wonderful.
Yeah, so, oh, you're great, but here's your errors, and I'm aware of it. Doesn't mean I hate you.
They had the ability to talk about ideas without getting offended.
Yes.
And in our culture, we have lost that ability. If
You
you
offend
disagree,
me.
if you disagree logically with someone today, you're on thin ice, and there's no love of truth anymore. Instead, there's this our camp versus your camp. It's a power struggle instead of a search for ideas.
Yeah.
And we've lost something.
Well, right now, let's turn it to the current political milieu, as you would say. I presume, well, I wouldn't do that. I'm asking you, I know the answer already. Do you like Cruz, Trump, and the two Democratic nonentities? Oh, yeah, their names, Bernie and Hillary. Do you like any of them?
If I just answer no, this is going to be a short answer to the question. I shouldn't
All
do
right,
that.
why do you not like any of them?
Well, okay, so Trump's affect is embarrassing.
Yes, it is.
To bringing up his manhood in a civil debate, insulting people, treating women as objects, insulting them because of their beauty. This is just not who you want representing your country.
No,
They're
he's an
people-
embarrassment.
They're expats.
Yeah.
Who, when people find out they're American, they say, "What do you think about Trump?" And they've got to defend themselves. It's horrible.
Yes.
And then we have Hillary Clinton, who her history is so full of terrible, egregious scandals. It's just obvious she is a morally bankrupt, power-seeking, horrible person.
Well, I agree with that, but let me ask you, which is her worst, in your opinion?
Which is her worst scandal?
Yeah, just you have a lot to pick there.
Oh gosh, well, there's Whitewater. There's the stuff that she did at her law firm. There's the foreign contributions to her Clinton Foundation,
Yes.
and the idea that she may have changed policy as a result of those contributions. There's her mishandling of Benghazi, and people died, and then seeming not to care about it. What does it matter at the end of all this?
Yes. I think that was her worst.
Her covering for the sexual dalliances of her husband by cutting down these women's reputations who had been abused by her husband. Her recent gaffe, it should have been a gaffe, but it wasn't mentioned. She said that she has experience with what to do when a man goes off the reservation. Off the reservation? What an American Indian phrase.
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
right? In this past horrible racist culture that we're trying to evolve out of, the Indians were supposed to know their place. They were supposed to stay on the reservation, and when they came off the reservation, that was a bad thing.
Yes,
She's
yes.
using that phrase, and the left is not calling her on it. They're giving her a pass.
You're right.
She's a war hawk. She's been part of the process of advocating droning in
other
the
words,
Middle East, and the left gives her a pass on
Again,
this.
the
We
left
see
media.
the meme on Facebook, which is the milk carton missing since 2007. The anti-war left.
Yes.
As soon as one of theirs gets in charge,
If she gets elected, it's going to be just another Obama with a female president.
plus more. I think
Yeah,
she's
yeah.
more corrupt than Obama.
Well, as Bill Danks would say, that's kind of good because things get done. If you can buy what you need, at least things get done.
So then we have Bernie.
Then Bernie.
And there are some things Bernie says that I like.
The anti-war
He's
stuff.
concerned about NSA spying.
Yep.
He's got the anti-war stuff. He's spoken against the drug war, and in the beginning he helped Ron Paul's efforts against the Fed. But then I think he
He bailed.
wimped out at the
He
end.
wimped out at the end, yeah.
But then of course he's a socialist. And
he
he's
wants to
for
give
more
all this
government
free
power in the
stuff.
economy. Yeah, wants to.
Which that leads me to a question. You are probably, being a generation apart from me, are more aware of what's going on in millennials' heads, and also you taught them. But so here's the question: with a group of millennials who are used to the comfort of the net and all the things technology does for people, and the individualism and all the things they can just get at their fingertips by typing us. Why are they for Bernie? Who just wants, free telephones, free college educations.
Well, they, like the Trump supporters, see that the system is really off the rails. That they see that there's an elite that's taken charge, whether it's the D's or R's. They see there's an elite that's taken charge, and they see Trump's usurping that elite on the right, and Bernie is trying to usurp, that is going to fail, that elite on the left.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? I don't know what's going on in millennials' heads. One thing I will say, though, is they love Uber. They love the internet.
Yes.
And these are free market promoting things. And one other thing, they hate capitalism, the term capitalism, because to them it means crony capitalism.
Yes.
To you and I, Ayn Rand fans,
We understand
capitalism
the difference.
is the free market.
It's like a
but
huge
if you say,
trade.
But if you say to them, if you say free market, if you say buying and selling things, if you think about Apple and Google and what they do, if you think about going to a farmer's market and buying something, they are all for it. So I think we need to not use the term, as much as this breaks our hearts, we shouldn't use the term capitalism around them. It means something different to them.
It's like the word gay. It's been changed by use.
Right, right.
So if capitalism is what we have today in the United States, I'm opposed to it.
Yeah, so
I'm for free markets and free men.
Do we spend our effort trying to change the perceptions of people, the associations people have with a word, or do we just go with a new term that means to them what we appreciate? Free market.
I've called myself a 19th century classical liberal. You know what that means.
Sure.
But I wonder if half my audience does.
No, indeed. You say liberal and they think you mean big government.
That's right. So even if you append it with 19th century classic,
they still don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. That's one of the problems we have. It's inherent in politics. If you read political comments, they are so immature. Yeah. They don't, because like anything else, political science and philosophy is a subject. Yeah. You and I have studied it. I have all my life, and I'm still studying it. Most people, ooh, that's ugly, and go on and do more interesting things like cars or jets or booze or women.
And here we are, we try to appeal to people on an intellectual level, and it doesn't work.
Yeah, it bounces off.
We need to appeal to them on their emotions. They don't care what you know until they know that you care. And we libertarians have a tin ear for this a lot of the time.
Especially the Randians.
We need to speak to them about what we're passionate about and about their own passions and how living in a freer country, in a freer society is going to get them what they want.
I once saw a cartoon in Reason magazine. And by the way, I was in Linden, Stinky Town up there with all the farms and manure.
Oh, yeah.
I went to the library and there was a whole bunch of Reason magazines.
Wonderful.
Someone donated them. But anyway, in Reason magazine, I saw this cartoon, and there's this guy down there he's in a city, and he's in the Bowery, and he's down and out, and he's lying there, and he's a bum. And he's reaching out to a guy coming by, and all you see is the guy, he's in a suit and has a nice attaché case. He's rich. And the guy says, could you spare $1? And he opens his briefcase, takes out Atlas Shrugged, and starts reading it to him, and then walks away.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what you mean, right?
Absolutely. We have to laaf at
Yes.
ourselves.
Did you ever see that?
I feel like I have. It sounds familiar.
Did you laugh when you saw it?
Yeah.
Because that
Through
is
the sadness.
Yeah,
because it's all too true.
I've known people like that.
Yeah.
Or another guy.
The people who say get a job.
Well, I feel that way. Jobs are so easy to get.
Yeah, but you don't say it.
Well, why not? I feel insulted when I see these bums on just begging. Hey, begging is what's done in India, not in this country. We have pride.
And I respect buskers. If there's someone playing guitar or saxophone on the street and they're playing well, you give or not.
If you
want. You really are inspired by what they're playing,
give them a lot.
I feel like voting for that with my dollars.
There you go. Yes, yes, yes.
So they're exchanging value for value. They're giving us something.
Well, but the trolls that are on the edges of freeways, and you get off, and you see a perfectly healthy-looking guy. He's standing there, and he's got 2 arms and 2 legs, and he's begging money.
You know, I give them excess food. When we have a box, in fact, I just did this yesterday. We had to clean up because we had guests coming.
Yeah.
And Julia got these unopened boxes of crackers out. We're never going to eat these, and they may have been a month past the expiration, but they were probably fine.
Yeah.
And I had like 7 or 8 boxes of these things, and I gave them out to the homeless guys. I don't give them money. Who knows? They might buy alcohol. They might buy drugs, but you give them food.
Well, something happened to me when I was 23. I was right out of the Army. I was in this nice, clean blue suit that I had bought in Hawaii. And I was walking along in Chicago on West Division Street. And I encountered the classic bum literally lying in the gutter. Looks up and says, "Hey, you got a buck?" And I said to him, "Yes, I have a lot of bucks. I just got out of the Army and I've saved it. But I don't intend to give them to you because I've got to start my career now. I have to go back to the University of Hawaii." And he said, "Well, just a buck." I said, "What do you intend to do with it?" "Get a drink." That's what he said.
You know
Get
what?
a drink. And I walked away.
Yeah, we libertarians have to have compassion.
Yes.
And so why is he there? I mean, he's probably there because the dead weight drag of taxation on the economy has made getting a job for him impossible.
Or more
Minimum
difficult.
wage
yeah.
laws, or you know, why are they in the streets? You know, it could be they have a drug addiction issue that couldn't be treated because of the drug war.
Yes.
They can't go seek treatment because it's illegal and they can be arrested. Or they're in a domestic situation where they're leaving their home because either they've been abusive or, you know, and maybe their kids have been taken away. The government contributes to these problems.
That's correct. But then there's another issue, a more generic question. If you live and have somewhat excess money, and you want to give it to a guy that's homeless, or you want to give it to a college student that's productive, or maybe a symphony orchestra, or maybe X, Y, or Z, how do you make those decisions, and how much? And also, more morally, do you owe it to these organizations to do that?
I have an expansive definition of rational self-interest.
Okay.
And I think that it is very often in our rational self-interest to improve our world. If we can contribute something structural that'll make it so that people are more productive, that helps me. Now, it's always going to come down to a subjective judgment call because we don't have the calculus for, okay, I value this certain amount, I value this certain amount, this is will have a certain amount of efficacy, and this will have a little less efficacy. We don't have the time to make that calculation, nor do we have the data. So it's got to be subjective. So you give to what you love. But I think that private charities are more effective than government welfare programs.
Absolutely.
If you really want to help the poor.
Yes.
And I think that if you're living in a free market society, that Heritage makes this graph, and I know our friend Ken Schooland has used this graph a lot. There's a measure you can make about how free market a nation is, and Heritage uses 6 factors: regulation, taxation, how easy it is to start a business, the general transparency of the banking system. There's a bunch of criteria.
So Hong Kong would be up at the top.
They rank all the nations. Hong Kong is number 1.
North Korea would be at the
North
bottom.
North Korea would be at the bottom.
And the U.S. used to be high, now it's slipping.
Right, and so if you arrange all these nations by how much economic freedom they have, and then on the vertical axis, you put the average wealth of the bottom 10%. So now we're talking about how well or poorly off are the poor.
Yes.
And you see a darn straight line, a very high correlation. I think the coefficient of correlation is something like 76.76, which is really, really high. And if you see this scatter plot, you can just see you don't want to be a poor person in a socialist country. You don't want to be a poor person in France and Spain, which are somewhere in the middle. You want to be a poor person in Canada or Hong Kong or the United States, which is 11th. Canada is actually a more free market nation than the U.S. is now.
Yes.
Canada's 5th on the Heritage scale, and the U.S. is 11th.
Where would you put the the ones that the socialists love to use as an example of socialism, but isn't really, the Swedish, Sweden, Denmark, Norway.
Johan Norberg recently came out with a marvelous little YouTube clip saying, yeah, in the 80s, we went hard welfare state left. We saw that it failed, and we have flipped. And now all of those Nordic nations, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, Holland, are in the top 30 most free economies in the world. If there are 190 nations
But they
on the
didn't
earth,
give up their socialized medicine, though.
and that's a huge problem we have facing
Yes.
us right now. Socialized medicine, it's hurt the economy.
And it's hurt medicine, too, I think.
Absolutely, we're going to see soon how it's hurt medical innovation. The insurance companies are trying to back out of it now because they're losing money on it. Insurance premiums have gone up. People are being penalized for not buying a private product. Jay Inslee, who was our congressman at the time, now he's governor of the state, was doing his town halls to try to promote the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, and he went by Linwood, and I went with a protest sign that said, "We have a right to a free market in healthcare."
Yes.
Shouldn't there at least be an opt-out clause that says, okay, you can either be part of this government system
Or not.
or you can be on the free market? But no, the free market has excluded us. The reason is, of course, they know that their government system cannot compete
That's
with a
right.
free market system.
That's what the same with government education. It's the exact same.
And so-
And notice how poorly it's done.
Oh my gosh, the urban government schools are an absolute disaster. And so my solution for education, privatize all of the government schools. Have each individual school building, and I would break it down at the building level, should be
Auctioned
put
off.
in the hands. I wouldn't auction it off. I
You
mean,
wouldn't?
this is, I realize the ANCAP immediate gratification view is to go directly to auctioning off and selling it, and they can have the money for the treasury. I say, let's put each of those buildings in the ownership of a nonprofit parental board, parents who have kids in the school. So now we have a bunch of private schools.
Little bureaucracies.
Well, I mean, these are nonprofits. I send my kids to a great little school in Linwood, Washington called Soundview School.
Yeah.
It's a nonprofit. It's got a parental board. And it's a marvelous community. People are invested in it. They work to build it.
I'll bet all the board members have kids in it.
All the board members have kids in it. They believe in the school.
They have a direct interest.
Absolutely. And the school answers their needs.
And I'll bet
It's
the board is
responsive.
not paid.
The board is not paid.
There you go.
And so now we need a transition period because now you're going to be asking poor people to pay tuition. My interim solution, you're not going to like this, is
Vouchers?
vouchers. I would give a full ride voucher based on the market rate to the bottom half based on income and assets of the students, with the idea that over 20 years, I'm happy to stretch it out that long.
No, I
It
was
would
about to say, how about
gradually-
over the next 2 years?
gradually be replaced by private foundation scholarship contributions.
Let me interrupt. That doesn't seem to be realistic, especially given the following. And Milton Friedman's famous for this line. He was asked about, why do you insist all these market mechanisms are so efficient and will work? And he said, look, in 1945, when Hitler fell and then Tojo and the Japanese fell, the liberal economists shouted and screamed and wrote pamphlets about how we should get all the controls we had during the war and keep them, because if we let 12,000 men in arms out immediately into the private sector, there's going to be a huge glut, and there's no way we can quickly get through that. We need to phase it out. In fact, they wanted to keep a lot of them in uniform up till about 1948. So what happened? What happened? They let them all out, and there was a boom in the economy.
But my plan
can
is
do
a
it quicker.
nod to political expediency. You know, if you tried to say, look, sell them immediately,
Yeah.
you'd never get that passed.
Well-
But if I offer a plan that says, look, gradually, and we'll see how it improves. Here's another example of gradual libertarianism. When I ran for Congress, I had 3 big issues. One of them was always legalizing, decriminalizing even, marijuana, a small step in the right direction. If I had said, if I were in charge, heroin would be legal next to schoolyards next week.
And you'd be laughed at.
I'd be laughed at. Yeah. So the socialists have their Fabians, right? Fabian socialism says, we know where we're going.
Yes.
We're going toward totalitarianism.
But we want to do it a little at a time.
And Hillary Clinton is a Fabian socialist,
absolutely.
and Bernie Sanders is a Fabian socialist.
Yes.
Why can't we be Fabian libertarians? Why can't we be creeping libertarians? And I have no problem saying, look, if in 20 years we would have a separation of school and state.
Well, I'll give you an answer.
I can wait that long.
Not me. I'll give you an answer. Rothbard. You got to read your Rothbard. He is famous for saying, "Oh, so we should be gradualists." That's what you're saying.
Absolutely.
You're admitting it.
Yeah.
I'm a gradualist. Now apply that to the issue of slavery. Oh, I'm a gradualist, anti-slaver. And my policy is that you slave owners may not beat your slaves. Okay. Oh, wait, no, but only once a week you can. And the cane with which you beat them has to be under a certain amount in diameter. And so, and in 8 years, we're going to make it every other week.
Okay, so now you've got a choice. Let me give you two choices.
I'm an abolitionist.
One choice is, in 20 years, all of the slaves are free. And there's no civil war.
Yeah.
The alternative is 800,000 people die in the Civil War, and there's a legacy of racism for hundreds of years after it. I go with the gradual method.
Oh, no. Oh, this is another, pay them off. Pay off the slave owners. That's what Europe did. And not a single war, not a single bullet. There was no chaos.
Well, slavery is horrendous, of course. We have to remember that the Civil War was not primarily about slavery.
It was about taxes.
That was a PR issue.
Yeah.
It was about
an excuse.
Lincoln's legacy. He did not want to be the president under which the Union dissolved. And the Union made such a foolish mistake when they attacked Fort Sumter. They should have just left it be there and not had a war. Because Lincoln had to have the South attack first.
That's right. And he maneuvered them into it. He was a wily guy.
He maneuvered them into attacking first, and he used the issue of slavery to support his war of aggression. And we libertarians make a big mistake when we're not anti-racist and we're not anti-slavery enough. And there's a confusion. Well, we understand that slavery is the ultimate violation of libertarian principles.
It's like the draft or like taxation. It's all part and parcel of the same thing.
And that racism is a form of collectivism.
Yes.
It's a form of judging people as groups instead of as individuals. But we have to bust on Lincoln because he dramatically enhanced the power of the federal government.
Yes.
And when we do that, though, people say, they're racists.
Well, but that's a deliberate confusion, which we're not responsible for it. Rothbard would say, had not the abolitionists argued fervently for the end of it, today if possible, tomorrow if necessary, not 20 years down the line, there would have been no effort to actually terminate it very quickly. Yeah. And there might have been slavery up until the 1880s. And that's why it's a moral issue for me.
I understand.
And I understand your point that where you're trying to make something palatable to generally statist people. Like, for instance, my family, we had a reunion back in Michigan in September. I might have told you about this. And I brought up this issue of Lincoln. Lincoln, tyrant or great president? Well, after you review it carefully, he's a tyrant. He was a horrible tyrant, responsible for maybe 800,000 dead, if you add up all the dead on both sides.
Violated the writ of habeas corpus.
Everything.
Imprisoned peaceful newspaper editorialists who were merely advocating against this war.
Yes.
He hung American Indians. I'm sorry, I'm thinking of Jackson now.
No, he did. There was an uprising in Minnesota.
That is what
and the Minnesotans wanted to hang about 200 Indians.
And he said maybe 50.
Yeah, maybe 50. So they hung 50. But he had the power of the presidency is insane. It's way too much. You're boring. You agree with me. Where do we disagree? It's more fun.
Well, where we disagree is those three, and where Rand and I agree. I'll put Rand in my camp just to add more muscle to my side.
Okay.
The three areas, functions of government that I think are legitimate functions of government. There's national defense. I don't think that can be provided effectively in a free market way. There's police enforcement, and there's courts. And now, with all these, except for national defense, I like the idea of there being private alternatives. I like the idea of, what's the term people use when they don't go to court? It's arbitration.
Arbitration. Yep.
Private agreements about if we're going to avoid this mess that is the government court system, let's provide in our contract that we do arbitration instead.
Yes,
That's awesome.
and you can get it done quickly.
I like the fact that in America there are more private security guards than there are uniformed blue police.
And the existence of
badges.
those private security guards, doesn't that just show you the cops are not doing their jobs right?
right.
It's
That's
a
right.
it's a null set. It's bad. Or as Rothbard would say, there are plenty of cops in New York, but there's no justice. There's no real. They come there afterwards and draw lines around the bodies.
But national defense, I don't see, maybe it's just a failure of vision on my part, I don't see how the free market could produce an aircraft carrier group. I don't see how the free market could run a fighter squadron. I don't see how the free market could provide tanks. I see how the free market can provide state militias with lots of dudes like you, perhaps, who really know about guns and can, hit a dime at 100 feet. And
Feet, yards.
well, I think that should be an essential part of a defensive military posture. And we spend 10 times what we need to spend on defense, because
Agreed.
it's not defense.
It's not defense. It's worldwide offense.
Empire.
That's right. Have you seen
how
this
many
latest
foreign
TV
bases?
show?
I love Ron Paul. Ron Paul educated me about this, about all the foreign bases we have. There's that image on Facebook you see of, if the Iranians are not a threat to us, why did they put their country right near all of our bases? And you see all of our bases.
It's surrounding them.
50 dots representing U.S. military bases.
Yes.
And we're trying to be the world's policeman. George W. Bush ran on the idea that we're not the world's policeman. And now here we are. And it could lead to the instability of our country.
Bruce, I'm getting the word here. We have 8 minutes left.
Okay.
And I want to interrupt you by asking you, is there anything that you came here to this show that I have not asked you about and you'd like to express?
Well, I wanted to flesh out my campaigns in 2002, 2004, and 2006 and talk a little bit about the 2006 campaign. I think I can do that quickly in our 8 minutes.
But go for it.
In all 3 years, I had 3 top issues. Ending or reducing the war on drugs incrementally, starting with marijuana. We have that now in Washington State. Marriage equality. Back in 2002, before it was popular, we libertarians were promoting marriage equality. And in 1972, the Libertarian Platform has marriage equality. We've been the friends of gays and lesbians way before it was popular.
The whole time.
And Washington State was among the first, before we had the federal action on marriage equality, to do that. And we haven't brought, the third issue I had was bringing the troops home. Well, I say 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
And almost 3 out of 3.
And why do you say 3 out of 3?
Well, I said almost 3 out of 3.
We haven't brought troops home in significant numbers, really.
There's the key, the
Okay.
term significant numbers, and they're still getting killed there. Yeah.
So I'm not claiming credit for having achieved those 2 things, but if I changed 1,000 votes a week earlier, 1,000 people's minds, maybe a month earlier than otherwise it would have happened, I've contributed a little bit through those campaigns.
I would say you done good, to quote a great Alaskan.
Thanks, Fred. So I was running in all 3 cases against an incumbent Democrat.
Yeah.
And I saw undermining the incumbent as the best strategy for a libertarian to have. And what if we could change the outcome? Not that I was excited about the Republican, but unseating an incumbent would be a big thing. So I picked those 3 issues partially because they are solidly libertarian, and that they tended to erode support from the Democrat from the left.
And yet, when I see the May Day parade and the reasoning of the current mayor of Seattle, I don't even know his name.
Don't either.
Good for you. I don't care either. Just a politician, one of many. But he was all for $15 an hour.
Yeah.
This is a massive misunderstanding of
hurt
how
the
markets
poor.
work.
It would hurt the least
It would
skilled.
hurt the very
It
people
would
involved.
hurt black people more. In effect, it's racist.
It's in effect saying, well, you have to be worth $15, and the the guy employing you, well, he's not, or these are entry-level jobs, so I'm going to automate them.
Right.
And McDonald's is already starting.
Yeah,
You've seen the pictures of the
kiosks.
The
We'll be
kiosk.
ordering there soon.
You walk in and press buttons.
That's right.
And
So then my 2006 campaign, I had the same big issues, and this wonderful group of libertarians accreted itself around me without any, effort on my own part. Wonderful, positive, including you.
I was where I even still have the
Jay
Bruce.
Mills and Ruth Bennett and Richard Shepard and cousin Brett Wilhelm. And,
Why do you call him cousin? Is he a cousin or no?
He's into genealogy, and he found a Guthrie several generations
I
back
see.
in his. So anyway, the big thing that I did in that campaign was, in order to get into the statewide televised debates, you had to have reached a threshold. And of course, that threshold was set to weed out third parties, because the two big parties ran that organization that did the debates, just like we do at the federal level. You had to have raised 10% of the money spent in the last gubernatorial race, and that was $10 million. So I had to raise $1 million. Well, it wasn't going to happen. But I looked at the value of my house. It was worth, about $350,000, $400,000. And then I looked at the money I'd saved up in my retirement accounts, and well, it was about $600,000. And I realized if I pledged this amount to my campaign, having no intention of spending it because I'm not stupid, I would have raised $1 million, and I could get into the statewide televised debates.
You did it.
So I mortgaged my house. I'm uncomfortable with debt. And so my house had been, I designed it here in Bellingham up on Alabama Hill, and we built it, we paid cash for it. So I had no debt encumbrances, not even for any cars. I always buy used cars because I don't like debt. And I just pledged it all to my campaign, and it ticked out at like $1,010,000. And so I got it. They couldn't keep me out. They tried. Jay Mills and Richard Shepard fought to make sure I got into those debates. And so here I was going against Mike McGavick, who's a Republican challenger, Maria Cantwell. Mike McGavick had a DUI on his record. And Maria Cantwell was well known in Washington, D.C. circuits as someone who enjoyed to drink at parties and maybe even got a little tipsy.
Yes.
And so Mike McGavick was promoting this program that says we want to drug test all welfare recipients. And I was asked during the debate, so do you agree with Mike McGavick's policy on this? And I said, I think there should be drug and alcohol testing of sitting members of Congress and the Senate. And that got one of the biggest laughs of the night.
I was there that night. This is the debate down at on the TV
King
station.
5, you were one of the people I invited.
Yes, I was there. And you know what? I think that those two opponents of yours simply didn't realize that you just made fun of them left and right. It just went over their heads. Like, who is this young guy? I mean, irrelevant what he says, but meanwhile, you wiped them. You cleaned their clocks.
You're so nice to say
Well,
that.
it's true. The people that were with me agreed.
The Team Guthrie struck a
That's
blow
right.
for liberty
Yeah, we did.
that day.
We did. And now they're doing their typical May Day things. What else you got, Brewster?
What else do I have?
What to put it the same question they did? No, we're running out of time. In 28.2 seconds, are our kids going to see liberty in our day, in their days?
Globally, liberty is on the increase. And the pendulum swings, and we don't know what's going to happen in the future. You know,
So we might as well keep fighting.
Jefferson said the natural progress of things is for government to advance and liberty to retreat. It swings back and forth. You know what? Even if we're not going to be successful, I enjoy the fight. I feel good fighting for liberty.
I do too. I was going to say that had you said something about whether you were positive or negative about winning the thing. My kids will take on that battle. Maybe yours will too. Thanks for coming, Bruce.
Thank you, Fred.
It's always a fun time when you and I set sail on the intellectual discourse on liberty. We're going to have some opponents in the next few weeks or months on Man versus the State. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.